Thank you very much. I would like to start by thanking the wonderful speakers before me for the research shared today, and also to congratulate our guests for the interest in this panel. The topic of my presentation is election observation guidelines as vehicles for change and enhancement of women and national minorities' participation in Romanian politics. The research premises are that in a constantly changing society, inclusiveness of all races, ethnic origins, religions, and genders is a fundamental aspect of democratic elections. When it comes to inclusiveness, electoral observation missions grant a special attention to the participation of women and national minorities in electoral processes. As observing electoral processes is a core component of the activity of the OSCE, its handbooks on election observation or the participation of national minorities in electoral processes provide the guidelines for the correct assessment of the degree of implementation of relevant international standards and instruments regarding political equality of women and national minorities. Implementing electoral reforms following these guidelines generate positive changes and enhancement of the level of participation of these target groups. The goal of the study is to assess the compliance of the Romanian electoral system with the main values supported by election observation guidelines as drivers of change regarding the participation of women and national minorities in election. The guidelines are congregated in two core categories: the respect for the principle of universal suffrage and the legal incentives to promote participation. The analysis is carried out according to the Romanian electoral legislation and data provided by official websites. The primary instruments regarding and promoting the universal suffrage start from two core doctrinary guidelines. Involving national minorities in political bodies is considered to be an important factor for integration of societies and prevention of conflicts. Promoting equal opportunities for the full participation of women in all aspects of political life is considered to be a fundamental aspect of a democratic society. Genuine electoral equality can only be achieved through substantial involvement of women and national minorities in public life. The principle of universal suffrage is promoted by milestone reform-shaping provisions, proclaiming the right of every individual to take part in the government of his country, directly or through freely chosen representatives, establishing the respect for the right of persons belonging to national minorities to effectively participate in public affairs, or empowering the equal rights to vote and to stand for election. Therefore, with respect to this principle and these milestone provisions, it is recommended that election observers assess if the Constitution guarantees universal suffrage without unreasonable restrictions, if there are special conditions or administrative restrictions on voting rights that raise concerns relating to women or national minorities, or if the electoral law treats women or persons belonging to national minorities the same way as others. The Constitution of Romania guarantees universal suffrage without any unreasonable restrictions for all types of elections. The Romanian system features effective, accurate, impartial, non-discriminatory and inclusive procedures for all eligible citizens to exercise the right to vote or stand for office. Legal restrictions are impartial and non-discriminatory, being in place only for mentally retarded or ill persons, laid under interdiction or prohibited under a court ruling. The absence of restrictions for persons belonging to national categories regarding voting or standing for office has determined the absence of criteria. Informal documents and procedures. Neither the voter register or the voter list nor the compulsory documents that are handed in to electoral bureaus in order to register candidates do not feature information regarding the ethnicity of persons. As well as this, the ethnicity of persons registered on party list for elections is not provided in the ballot. The absence of ethnic criteria is the core element for changing an electoral system and building equality, as it also generates the absence of any special conditions or barriers on voting rights, registering candidates, campaigning, access to media, or participation in electoral bureaus. On the other hand, the absence of ethnic criteria also generates a quantitative limitation of this present study. With respect to the principle of freedom of association, there are political organizations, electoral alliances, and civil society organizations that have declared to be representative of certain ethnic minorities, but citizens belonging to ethnic minorities are also politically engaged in mainstream political parties. Therefore, comprehensive data regarding the political engagement of this target group is unavailable. Despite the fact that the gender of a voter or candidate is relevant by name or personal identification number, there are no gender-related barriers on voting rights, registering candidates, campaigning, access to media, or participation in electoral bureaus. With regards to assessing political equality by election observers, one of the main points of interest is the application of the right to form a political party. Election observation guidelines point out that no unreasonable obstacles should exist with regards to establishing a political organization, and the Romanian regulation in the field have consistently changed in comparison to the pre-revolutionary period. The law on political parties provides a simple procedure for registration of political parties. Almost all the documents that must be filled in with the Bucharest Tribunal are issued by the founding members, and the decision-making process is very swift. At this moment, there are 165 legally established political organizations in the records of the Bucharest Tribunal. And the law also provides a series of exceptions that further simplify the management process undertaken by organizations that represent national minorities. For example, their members are not required to be exclusively citizens that have achieved the right to vote. The organization is allowed to also feature in its statutes all other goals than political ones, or it cannot be dissolved by the Bucharest Tribunal on grounds of lack of activity. As well as this, the law provides that these organizations are also accepted from the establishment for under the procedure described above. Upon registration, they can be filed as associations or foundations and can stand in elections if they are represented in the Council of National Minorities. With regards to electoral campaign fairness, observation missions are also assessing if there are restrictions on campaigning in minority languages, the fair access to media for women and national minority candidates, as well as the measures incriminating hate speech. The electoral legislation does not feature restrictions regarding the language chosen by candidates to conduct their campaigning. Moreover, it is usual for political organizations representing national minorities to deliver campaign materials or speeches in the native language of the national minority they represent. Fair access to media for all candidates is also provided by the Romanian legislation, antenna times being legally assigned to electoral competitors in proportion to the number of complete lists of candidates submitted and not according to gender or ethnic criteria. Measures incriminating hate speech are provided by the electoral laws, prohibiting the use of discriminatory messages of incitement or to hatred and intolerance, propaganda messages that promote or justify racial hatred, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, as well as means, acts, or actions of such sort. The OSCE has issued recommendations regarding specific change-inspiring elements of electoral systems, or special measures that could be implemented in order to facilitate national minorities' representations. Lund Recommendation number 10 provides that geographic boundaries of electoral districts should facilitate the equitable representation of national minorities. With respect to these recommendations, electoral observers assess the implications of the electoral system for the representation of the target groups, the specific provisions of or measures in elections in the election legislation for the participation of women and national minorities representatives, the fairness of state funding for all parties or candidates, as well as the initiatives to promote participation of women in elections and their effects. Therefore, the boundaries of Romanian electoral districts are drawn following administrative divisions. Candidatures for the position of President and Member of the Parliament are casted nationwide thus the electoral administration boundaries for these elections are irrelevant for our topic. The boundaries for electoral district determine the ethnic diversity of local elected authorities or members of the parliament. The territory of Romania Romania is administratively organized in 41 counties and the municipality of Bucharest, the state capital. Counties bring together cities and villages. The municipality of Bucharest is administratively divided into 6 districts. The public administration authorities through which local self-governance is accomplished are elected local councils and mayors. The elected county councils are authorities that coordinate the activity of public services of interest for the country. Therefore, the boundaries of local electoral districts or constituencies are drawn exclusively following constitutional administrative divisions and facilitate the leadership of persons belonging to ethnic minorities in villages, cities, districts, municipalities or counties where the minority population is consistent. Under the provision of the Constitution, the Parliament is the supreme representative body of the Romanian people and the sole legislative authority of the country. Established with a bicameral structure, it houses 2 chambers. Members of the Parliament are elected for a term of 4 years by universal, equal, direct, secret and freely expressed vote. For the organization of these elections, there are 43 electoral constituencies, 41 for 41 counties, 1 for Bucharest and 1 for Romanians residing abroad. Furthermore, as there are national minority communities whose small population make it difficult to win a seat in the parliament, the Romanian system provides reserved seats for national minorities. The Constitution provides that each of the organizations of citizens belonging to national minorities which fail to obtain the number of votes for representation in the parliament have the right to 1 deputy seat. And the law on parliamentary elections abides by this constitutional provision. As in the case of national minorities, the electoral legislation of Romania does not contain provisions that could lead to differences in treatment between women and men who stand in election. The Constitution guarantees universal, equal, direct, secret and free vote for all types of electoral processes. And the Constitution also establishes that the Romanian state guarantees equal opportunities for women and men to fill military or civil functions and dignities. Along with these provisions, following the valid values promoted by election observation guidelines, a series of electoral law reforms were accomplished in order to stimulate women in running for office. In order to promote women representativeness on lists of candidates, the laws on local and parliamentary elections were changed in 2004 to provide for the obligation to represent both genders in the lists of candidates. The same provisions were included in 2007 in the law on election of the members of the European Parliament. The obligation was maintained in the new versions of these laws. Thus, these laws contain explicit provisions on the obligation to represent both genders in the list of candidates. With regards to the fairness of state funding for parties or candidates, there are no provisions that generate disparities between political organizations representing national minorities or other political organizations. In terms of level of representation, following the assessment of the level of inclusiveness in the Romanian electoral system, this section presents relevant empirical data regarding the practical effects of the provisions. To begin with, there is a strong representation of women in the human resources involved in the organization and conduct of electoral processes. The Permanent Electoral Authority, the autonomous institution with general competence in electoral management, has approximately 65% of the staff represented by women. Also, the Permanent Electoral Authority manages data regarding electoral experts and computer operators. Election experts are people who have the legal capacity to be appointed as presidents of polling stations or their deputies. Electoral experts cannot be members of a political party. About 71% of them are women. As well as this, about 63% of the computer operators that are currently in the records of the Permanent Electoral Authority of Romania are women. The fact that more than half of the staff of the authority, the electoral experts and the computer operators are women, proves the openness of the Romanian electoral system for the target group and the absence of any discrimination regarding the accessibility to these positions. The impact of the regulations providing equality or incentives for national minorities in their representation in elective bodies. According to the nationwide census, national minorities represent approximately 11% of the total population. The best represented minorities in Romania being the Hungarian minority and the Roma minority. Following the features of the Romanian electoral system, these minorities are well represented through members of the parliament and elected local authorities. Today, 18 national minorities are represented in the Romanian parliament. 15 of them are each represented by one member, given the reserved seat policy. 2 are represented by only one member, also given the reserved seat policy, but the Slovak and the Czech minorities have stood in election on behalf of one political union. And the political organization representing the Hungarian minority has achieved 30 elected seats. This organization has always met the threshold in all parliamentary elections organized after the fall of the communist regime, thus being the best represented political organization representing, a national minority. Regarding the number of women, after 1989, right now in the current legislature, we have the highest number of elected women. After this conference, you will be able to assess the remainder of my presentation in the paper that will summarize all the presentations. And I would like to jump to conclusions. The guidelines provided by the OEC handbooks on election observation provide fundamental incentives for change in electoral systems in order to promote inclusiveness. The Romanian electoral system respects the values promoted by these guidelines. The number of women in elected position is the highest after 1989, and national minorities are politically represented at local level where the minority is persistent, as well as at the level of the parliament. Moreover, the largest national minority has a strong representation and even has achieved seats in the European Parliament. However, it is my personal opinion that further improvements can be achieved at quantitative level for women and other national minorities. Further enhancing political representation of these target groups depends on 2 core infrastructures: the electoral system and the infrastructure of political symbols. The electoral system already protects general equality and inclusiveness and also features incentives. Moreover, there are some initiatives that stimulate the participation. Thus, it is the infrastructure of political symbols that can increase representation of the target groups. The increasing number of women and representatives of national minorities that stand for office and achieve mandates depends solely on the will of the electorate, influenced by symbols of political value, such as opinions and projects, achievements, and examples of best practices while in office, as well as holding public positions of great visibility, mayor of a major city, prime minister, or head of a mainstream political party.